when the multi-talented Madhu Nataraj asked me to chair the third Maya Rao conference, I was honored and touched. You see, I'm a failed Bharatanatyam dancer, and I thought, what can I tell the accomplished people who are gathered here about dance that they don't know? My background is in psychology and journalism, and through it, I'm going to say a few words, 10 minutes, about my association and my thoughts about dance. So let me begin with a story which I watched on National Geographic. A terrified deer is running across the grassland. Its eyes are wide, its body is elongated. A tiger is in hot pursuit. The deer is jumping over shrubs and racing towards the Aghanashini river. She who is wide of hip and wide of bosom, as the literature says. The tiger chases it and is closing in. The deer reaches the river and plunges right into the fast-flowing, crocodile-infested waters. The tiger screeches to a halt and watches its prey get away. Miraculously, the deer gets to the other side and it struggles up the river bank. And then it does something. It starts shaking its body. And we've all seen this. We've seen puppy dogs do it. We've seen kids do it. It shakes its body. And the announcer's voice comes across in the National Geographic and says, this shaking is how the deer gets rid of the stress that it's built up, the adrenaline that has accumulated. We humans used to do this too, before we forgot to use and incorporate movement in our lives. We used to do this, and now we've forgotten to incorporate movement into our lives. I think about this because a young infant has come into our family. She's a little baby girl, a couple of weeks old. And I thought to myself, you know, when all of us come through the passage, the birth canal, what are the things we do right after we emerge? What are the things we do right after we are born? We do two things. We cry and we move. This is before we reach for the mother's breast. This is before eating. And today when I watch this young baby, Rocio, in her crib, the minute she wakes up, she's making these soft, graceful movements. And I thought to myself, you know, I'm a writer. Before there was speech, there is movement. Movement heals. Movement is life. Movement is how we make sense of this madness around us. So dance is codified, systematized movement. It is as complex and as simple as that. Today, we are here to celebrate dance, to celebrate Dr. Maya Rao, who epitomized it. And we are here to celebrate dancers. Dancers play with many things, but if you distill it down, they play with the elements or the panchabhutas, and they play with rasa, or it's a complex, untranslatable word, but I'm going to call it emotions for alliteration's sake. So the elements and the emotions. And this dance of rasa and the elements and emotions has been with us humans as long as we have been on earth. As you see in the cave paintings of Bhimbetka, of Lascaux in Indonesia, rasa, emotions, is an engagement. And our literature is very clear that while the dancer, the performers, one of her or his goals is to create these emotional resonance, it is, as audiences, we are equal participants to this. We have to engage in order to appreciate and get the benefits of the rasa. We have to be a rasika. And this means many things. At the very least, it means putting down our phones and silencing it. When magic happens, it means that you forget yourself and you lose your ego, the monkey mind that is chattering, and you attain what every ancient text calls a unity with the divine. You look at Sikh literature, Sufi, Christian gospel theology, you look at Sanskritam, They all call the arts a version. Sanskrit calls it Brahmananda Sahodara, which is a pathway to attaining the bliss that comes from this union with the Brahmananda. Okay, that's great, you're all saying. But this is the time of COVID. This is the time of a pandemic. Why should we care about the arts when we are losing our lives and livelihood? I mean, these are leisure time pursuits. What relevance do they have with our very difficult and dangerous future currently? So people say that, they say flippantly, the only two things you can guarantee in the future are death and taxes. To that I will add one thing. You can guarantee that we will all experience pain and heartbreak in our future, in our collective futures, in our individual futures. Bear with me here because this is actually an optimistic story, even though I'm talking about pain. COVID has taught us the pain of loss, of losing our friends, losing our livelihood. But even before the pandemic, pain was, is, and will be part of our lives, part of our futures. And the worst thing is it will happen when we are least expecting it. So what is the optimism here you're thinking? Because you see, humans invented the arts to allow us to cope with pain. Listen to Kshetraya's laments. Listen to the pathos in the poetry of Kabir, Rumi, or Mirabai. Listen to the wail of a soprano as she sings an old opera. Read the writings of St. Thomas Aquinas. Watch the dancers of Konya in Turkey, the Sufi dancers with one hand up and one hand down. Look at Edvard Munch's painting, particularly the one called The Scream. It's all about pain, all about suffering. But, and here comes the redemption. In every ancient culture, pain was viewed as a pathway to the higher self. Our ancestors didn't turn away from pain. They didn't numb themselves with substances or alcohol. They used it as a transformative act. How? Through the arts. If you look at mythology, if you look at religion, prayer, ritual, you will see this alchemy in action, where people are taking their pain and transforming it into a thing of beauty. The kind of life-changing suffering that we're all enduring now would be seen by spiritual masters as a pathway to character and wisdom. It is a way for us to go back into our cocoons and emerge as beautiful butterflies. Yes, I know all this sounds great in theory, but undergoing it is difficult. I wrote the speech, I internalized it. But in order to engage with it and do what I'm preaching, it requires two things. It requires time away from my smartphone. It requires courage to face my inner self. Sometimes life gives you no choice, It throws a vajra or a thunderbolt in the form of heartbreak, death, divorce, betrayal. But when the human ego is beaten, the soul perks up and it instantly recognizes this moment as an opportunity to shed what is no longer needed. When your heart is broken, the soul is released from all these traditional constellations, the game face that we all put on in social media and Instagram. The soul perks up and realizes that all these prior constellations can be dismembered, dissolved, and rejuvenated. So pralaya happens. For that you need pain. This is not a comfortable process, but it's a necessary one. Today we live in a productivity culture. We all are smart, accomplished, we have our to-do lists, and we think we are in control. Everybody here, you're all terrific people, you are in charge. So then how then to engage with this alchemy of transformation? How then to reach inwards to our higher self, which one could argue is the most meaningful part of life. It's what we are here for. I say that the arts can offer us safe passage. They can hold your hand and guide you into the realms of the heart and the spirit. So calling performing arts, calling dance and music and literature as leisure time pursuits is like saying, a Chola bronze is a piece of metal. the wholeness that the soul aspires to, has nothing to do with getting what we want. It has nothing to do with the tick marks. It has to do with embracing the fragility and the brokenness within each of us in order to access the heart and the spirit and become whole. Again, to do this, there's no better guide than the performing arts. Because when a dancer emotes, our mirror neurons will fire up and we will experience the Navarasa, the compassion, the bhakti, the courage, the shringara, the joy and the sorrow. And through her, through him, we emerge rejuvenated. You're all here today, which means that you want to engage with the arts. Now, what is that? That's a very abstract word. What does engagement with the arts mean? For a viewer, it just means sinking into a state of relaxed attention. Both words are important. Relaxed attention. And at its best, who knows? You can lose yourself. Like the musician Vijay Shiva said, I said, how do you define art? He said, it's an art makes you lose yourself. So these moments of so-called unproductivity can become the times when you're actually connected to the deepest part of yourself, when your creativity flourishes, when the imagination is allowed to play. I want to end with a takeaway, which is, again, we are in the takeaway culture. Try to incorporate more movement in your lives. And the easiest way to do this is to watch children, because they do this unconsciously. When a toddler is mad, he or she rolls on the ground. They stomp, they release the adrenaline, they release the stress, and then they go back and play. So we can do the same. Today when we are stressed out because of some meeting, we can just go into the bathroom and do that shaking that the deer did. I guarantee you that you will feel better for it. And then you can come back out to your meeting and, put on the game face. So as we grow up, we are taught age-appropriate behavior. What does that mean? It essentially means suppressing the two things that we are born with, the ability to cry and the ability to move. So we freeze, and that's age-appropriate behavior. Why not, instead of suppressing, you express? That's an option. And again, music, dance, poetry, if you recite poetry, these are all ways of alchemy. They are ways of expression. They are ways of accessing your emotions and converting into something positive. When you get out of your computer and your chair, do we stretch? We stretch when we wake up. We still have that old ancient brain telling us to do that. But lots of kids do, dogs do, they call it pandiculation. So maybe we remind ourselves when we get up from the computer, just stretch a bit. A wise man said, the soul, the gods and the spirits, they are not dependent on our human beliefs to exist. What gives them presence and power is our practice. They don't need us, but we need them. By being here, you have allowed the arts to be part of your practice, part of your sadhana, part of your seva. And you are allowing the script of your life to be rewritten. You will be richer for it. Perhaps not materially, but in every other realm that matters. I hope you and I remain fortunate enough to have dance as part of our lives. Not for dance's sake, but for our own. Because you see, we are not just perfecting our resumes. We are also perfecting our obituaries. And dance, music, and the arts will help us in this path long after our resumes are irrelevant. Thank you.